Hello, and thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation. My presentation, or our presentation, is about the role of punctuation in translation. I prepared this work with Ghassan Mourad and Rose Al-Amil from the Lebanese University. So the topic of the presentation is an attempt to explain the process of translating punctuation marks into a target language in human translation and the role of punctuation in automatic translation. Or to answer the question, does punctuation have a role in automatic translation? Our study is based on a corpus analysis. So it is based on a French-Arabic corpora of Amin Malouf's books, Les Identités Meurtrières, and its Arabic translation. I want to briefly talk about the previous work that was done on the topic of punctuation in translation. Most of the work that we consulted consists of contrastive linguistic analysis from a functional perspective. It was a comparison of the functions of each punctuation mark in two languages. And it was mostly targeted at translation students and not to researchers or linguists. But those studies, although they are important, they are descriptive. They are not based on an actual corpus analysis to support the findings. And most of them fail to relate their findings to a translation theory. The problem of the comparison, of the functions of each punctuation mark for Arabic language is that there are no written conventions of the current use of Arabic punctuation, because punctuation is a recent addition to the Arabic system. We started punctuating Arabic text in the early 20th century, and they followed French rules of punctuation before starting to develop proper punctuation rules specific to Arabic. But the problem is that punctuation manuals were never updated. So we do not have a written support that will explain the actual functions of punctuation marks that we find in newspapers or in novels, etc. So the translator must therefore have enough knowledge of the structure that is preferred by Arabic readers in order to punctuate their sentence correctly or to translate punctuation correctly. The other problem is the writer's preference to use a punctuation mark instead of another, despite the general norm. So, for example, the preference to use the comma instead of the semicolon, despite the clear explanation of the functions of semicolons. And this is a problem that we can find in English, French, or Arabic in literature. So these are the two books that our study is based on. So it is Amin Malouf's book, Les Identités Meurtrières, and its Arabic translation, Al-Hawiyat Al-Qatila. So what we found is that the target text is punctuated differently, and the number of frequency of punctuation marks highly vary, especially punctuation marks that are used to segment sentences. In the exception for the exclamation point, the question mark, and the quotation marks, which stayed the same, or almost the same, only one less exclamation point for Arabic, for example. But punctuation marks that are used to separate parts of sentences and to define the end of sentences highly varied between the source and the target text. To explain this, I found it best to locate punctuation in the translation process of decoding the source text and recoding the target text, which is the theory of science of translation by Eugene Nida. And his theory was inspired by Chomsky's generative transformational grammar theory. So according to this theory, we have a source sentence with its specific form or structure, the surface structure. Then the meaning of this sentence, the message that this sentence conveys, which is the deep structure of a sentence. And then we will transform this deep structure into a surface structure that is proper to the target language, and that might be different from the source language surface structure. So based on this work, instead of having a list of functions of punctuation and their equivalents in another language, translators will focus on the deep structure of the source sentence and then recode it into a surface structure appropriate to the target language system. However, they will keep a list of equivalences for non-existent typographic marks such as capital letters and italics, and they replace them sometimes with punctuation when needed. So italics in Arabic are translated by quotation marks, and capital letters are sometimes, if the whole word is written in capital letters for some reason, it will be translated into either the bold character or quotation marks. To support this finding, so we have these examples from our corpus. So the original text: que de fois m'a-t-on demandé, avec les meilleures intentions du monde, si je me sentais plutôt français ou plutôt libanais. The Arabic translation: فكم من مرة سألني البعض عن طيب نية إن كنت أشعر بنفسي فرنسيا أم لبنانيا. So here we have two commas that were not kept in the target text. So the two commas here are put before and after the circumstantial complement of way in French, the French circumstantial complement of way. And though keeping it in the target text would not change the meaning, but it will not be proper to the Arabic language system regarding sentence construction, because we do not put commas before and after circumstantial complement of way in Arabic, and except if this complement is at the beginning of a sentence, we will follow it by a comma. Otherwise, we do not use commas. In this example, the colon has a function that does not exist in Arabic, or is rare in Arabic, let's say. So it relates to complete sentences in which the second clarifies the first. And colons do not relate to complete sentences in Arabic. It is very rare, and it does not indicate a relation of clarification between the second sentence and the first sentence in Arabic. So we translated it, or the translator translated it by a comma, and then the word وهي تقوم على, which means based upon, which is based upon, in order to remove the ambiguity of the function of the colon in the sentence. The same thing happened here. So we translated the colon by a connector, which is the kaf, which means such as in Arabic. In regards of machine translation, the sentence is the main pillar of all automated programs for language processing, as computational linguistics are currently unable to find rules for larger parts, such as paragraphs, or for smaller parts, such as vocabulary, or not vocabulary, smaller parts of sentences, clauses, for example. So only the sentence has the enough grammatical and syntactic rules to make it easy to parse for an automatic translator. So if the translator translates some punctuation marks into connectors, what about the automatic translator, like Google Translate, for example, who relies on translation of sentences because sentences are the only linguistic item that has a specific clear structure. So for example, an automatic translator will have a noun, verb, preposition, and noun, and will translate it into Arabic by a verb, noun, preposition, and noun. So if there was a comma after before the preposition, that is not supposed to exist with this Arabic preposition, with the target preposition. Would the machine translator be able to not make this mistake? We translated the examples that we mentioned above into by Google Translate, and the result was punctuation stayed the same. There was no change in punctuation between the source text and the target text. So in automatic translation, punctuation marks are easily identified, but they are not translated. The target text had the same punctuation as the source text, and the number of sentences and of paragraphs remains unchanged. However, here I said most of the time, because automatic translation modifies punctuation that precedes or follows specific connectors in a sentence structure. So for example, donc when used without punctuation in the middle of a French sentence will be translated in Arabic by its equivalent in Arabic, and it will be placed at the beginning of a sentence followed by a comma. وبالتالي, comma. The same thing, for example, when placing a comma before the relative pronoun which in English. For Arabic connectors, and regarding automatic translation, the problem would be their polysemy. So connectors such as waw or fa have more than one function in Arabic, and they are preceded by a period or by a comma, depending on the function of the connector, and they can sometimes start paragraphs. So we can start paragraphs by the particle waw. So this might be a problem if Arabic is the target language. So in conclusion, the role of punctuation in the translation process lies in recoding the deep structure of a source sentence into a proper surface structure in the target sentence, rather than comparing punctuation functions of one language, or putting a list of functions of punctuation marks in one language and then a list of punctuation in the other language. So we change the whole structure of a sentence in order to make it easily received by target readers, and then we will punctuate according to the syntactic structure of this surface of this sentence, of this target sentence. So the translator develops certain benchmarks, especially grammatical or syntactic, depending on the preference in the target language system, which means that the translator can omit punctuation marks that are not relevant in the target sentence and can replace them with another punctuation mark or with connectors or words. Because using proper punctuation is important to remove discursive and syntactic ambiguity from certain statements. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you very much for this very interesting talk. I'm waiting for comments and questions by the audience. I have a question. So you have examined Google as an automatic translator, but what about other systems and systems relying more on rules than on machine learning?
I'm sorry, I was reading the comments. I did not hear the question. I'm sorry.
Yes, I was saying that you have considered Google, and you gave some examples, but there are also other translators based on rules and not on machine learning. So what about them? How do they deal with punctuation?
Okay, I will let Ghassan answer this question because I did not do research or studies about other machine translation systems. So Ghassan, can you answer?
Yes, for every automatic translation system, they have same work. They don't make punctuation mark in the consideration because every translator applications work with the phrases, with sentence, because we don't have grammar for other for paragraph, for example, or other things in the language. This is the problem.
And this means also that whether there is punctuation or not in the source language, the translation will be the same, or can there be errors because of erroneous punctuation in the source?
Usually it stays the same unless it is a connector, because the rules in machine translation, the rules that are coded in machine translation systems are related to connectors mostly. So for example, there's a comma before which, but no comma before that. So the translation of the relative pronoun, whether it is which or that, the automatic translation might add a comma depending on their translation. But other than connectors, there are no, the punctuation stays the same other than that. For example, quotation marks or periods.
And what is your tolerance on the private preferences for punctuation? For example, when you are translating, I guess you want to give the style of the original text. So if there is some specific punctuation, will you do the same in Arabic, or doesn't it make sense?
So as we saw in the numbers, I will share the screen again, and the numbers. So as we saw here, okay. So all punctuation marks that were considered stylistic, like the exclamation mark, question mark, or sorry, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So the let's say the ellipsis, the quotation marks, not the italics, the exclamation point, and the question mark, almost they stayed the same. So these are the punctuation that are considered stylistic and not syntactic or grammatical, like the period or the comma or the semicolon.
And you have both much less commas and less semicolons. So
Yes.
these have simply disappeared. They weren't replaced by anything else.
They were replaced by connectors.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I see no questions from the audience. So thank you very much for this.
Thank you for hosting our talk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yanis.